The alarm sirens had been screaming for 9 hours straight when I finally gave the order that would change everything. My name is High Matriarch Lysana, and I rule what is left of the Veshari people. We are a gentle species of light. Our bodies glow softly from within, and that glow fades when we lose hope. Right now, my own light was barely visible. I could see my hands on the command table and they looked gray. The reports kept coming. Another colony lost. Another fleet destroyed. The Cathari swarm was eating my civilization world by world, and nothing we did could slow them down. They were not soldiers. They were not conquerors. They were hunger with teeth, and they had chosen us for their next meal. I stood in the war room of my floating palace above our capital world, and I watched the big screen show me the end of everything I loved. 3 weeks. That was what my best officers told me. 3 weeks until the main enemy fleet reached our homeworld. After that, there would be no more Veshari people. No more songs. No more gardens made of living crystal. No more children with soft, glowing skin who asked too many questions. Just silence. My chief advisor, an old male named Teravan, stood beside me. His own light was almost gone. He had lost his whole family in the first wave, and he had not spoken much since. But now he turned to me with dim eyes and said something I did not expect. "Matriarch," he whispered, "we have not called everyone." I looked at him. "We have called the Thalari, we have called the Oryx, we have called the Droth. They have all said no or sent help that failed. Who is left?" He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said one word. "Humans." The room went cold. 2 of my younger officers actually stepped back from the table. One of them made a soft sound of fear. The word humans was not a word we used lightly in the galaxy. It was a word whispered in dark corners, the way children whisper about monsters under their beds. I had read the secret files. Every ruler of a major species had read them. The files told the story of a small blue world called Earth and the creatures that lived on it. The files were not kind reading. The humans had fought each other for thousands of years. They had made weapons that could break continents. They had almost ended themselves 3 separate times. The Thalari Council had voted in secret many years ago to keep the humans locked away from the rest of the galaxy. They were simply too dangerous to let out. But the vote had failed. By a small margin, the humans had been allowed to join the Galactic Accord as full members. They were watched. They were studied. They were never trusted. And now my dying world was going to call them. I turned to my communications officer, a young female named Ven. Her light was flickering badly. "Open a channel to Saul," I said. "Send our coordinates, send our casualty numbers, send everything we know about the enemy." She stared at me. "Matriarch, if we do this, the Thalari will never forgive us. They will cut us out of the Accord. They will say we invited danger into the galaxy." "Ven," I said softly, "look outside." She turned her head and looked at the great window. Our sky was full of fire. 2 of our moons were burning. The enemy had already pushed past our outer defense line. "The Thalari are not here," I said. "The Thalari will not be here. In 3 weeks there will be no Veshari people for them to forgive or not forgive. Send the message." Her hands shook as she worked the controls. The message went out on a narrow beam aimed directly at the human homeworld. It was short. Just coordinates, casualty counts, and one word in the rough human tongue that my translator had pulled from old records. The word was help. We sat in silence after she sent it. I did not know what I expected. Perhaps a polite rejection like the others. Perhaps no answer at all. The humans had only been in the Accord for a short time. They had no reason to care about a small glowing people they had never met. The reply came back in 4 minutes. 4 minutes. I remember looking at the clock and not believing it. Our message had taken hours to reach Earth, but their reply had come back almost at once, as if someone had been waiting by the receiver. The reply was also short. It was 3 lines long. "Message received. Hold on, we are coming." No questions, no demands for payment, No long discussions about policy, just those 3 lines. Taravan made a sound I had not heard from him since the war began. It was a small, choked laugh. He put one thin hand on the table to keep himself from falling. "Matriarch," he said, "I think we just did something very brave or very foolish. I am not yet sure which." I looked at the screen again. The Cathari swarm kept coming. Our little fleet of crystal ships kept dying. 2 more of my captains called in their final reports and then went silent forever. I closed my eyes and tried not to weep. But deep in my chest, under all the fear and all the grief, something else had started to burn. It was small and strange, and I did not trust it, but it was there. It felt a little bit like hope. I did not know that day that I had just made the most important call in the history of my people. I did not know what was coming toward my world. I did not know what humans really were, or what they had spent so long becoming. I only knew that my people were going to end in 3 weeks, and that some rough voice from a small blue planet had told me to hold on. So I held on. I ordered my remaining fleet to pull back to the inner worlds. I ordered my ground defense teams to dig in. I ordered every child, every elder, every civilian on the outer colonies to move to shelters deep under the surface. I did not tell them that the shelters would not save them if the enemy reached our world. I only told them to go, and they went, because I was their matriarch and they trusted me. That night I stood alone on the balcony of my palace and watched the stars. Somewhere out there, a fleet was already moving. I did not know what it looked like. I did not know who was on board. I did not know their names or their faces or the sound of their voices. I only knew they were coming. And in the cold dark, with my world burning and my people dying and my own soft light barely visible on my skin, I whispered a small prayer to no one in particular. I whispered, "Please, whoever you are, be enough." The enemy ships pushed closer. Another colony fell. Another 10,000 of my people stopped breathing. My light dimmed further. I wondered if I would live to see the humans arrive at all, or if my world would already be ash by the time they reached us. The days moved slowly and quickly at the same time, the way time does when you are waiting to die. Taravan came to my rooms each morning and each evening. He brought me reports I did not want to read. He held my hand when I could not stop shaking. He was the only one who knew how close I was to giving up. "Hold on," he kept saying, repeating the human words back to me like a small charm. They said to hold on. On the 9th day after my message, Ven came running into the throne room. She had not run in years. She was too old for it and her light was too weak. But she ran that day, and her face was lit up in a way I had not seen since the war began. "Matriarch," she said, gasping for breath, "the outer sensors have picked up something big, coming in fast on the path from Saul." I stood up so quickly that my chair fell behind me. "How big?" I asked. She looked at her datapad, then she looked at me. Her hands were shaking. "Matriarch," she said, "I think they sent everything." I ran to the window. The stars were there, as always, cold and far. But now there was something moving among them, something that had not been there the day before. A shape, a long dark shape, followed by more shapes and more and more. The humans had arrived. And I had no idea, standing at that window with my heart pounding in my thin chest, that I was about to meet the strangest and most frightening species in the known galaxy, and that they had come not to take my world, but to save it. The first human ship came into view above our capital, and I felt my breath stop in my throat, not from fear, from shock, because whatever I had imagined a human warship to look like, this was not it. Veshari ships are beautiful. We grow them from living coral in deep ocean farms. They shine. They sing a soft harmony as they move through space. They are works of art as much as they are tools of war. The human ships were not works of art. The human ships were ugly. The lead ship was a huge gray thing, 2 kilometers long at least, covered in mismatched armor plates that looked like they had been welded on by different hands at different times. One whole section of the hull was a different color from the rest, as if it had been replaced after some old battle and no one had bothered to paint it to match. There were scorch marks along the sides. There were dents. There was a huge gash near the bow that had been patched with what looked like a metal sheet bolted in place. And painted on the side of this monster, in rough white letters, was a name. My translator read it out for me. The name of the ship was Enough. Behind it came more ships, each one uglier than the last. They had names too: Lady Grudge, Bad Decision, Old Argument, Late for Dinner. None of them matched. None of them were pretty. Some of them looked like they had been built from old freighters and refitted for war. Taravan stood next to me at the window and made a small sound in his throat. "Matriarch," he said softly, "are we sure these are warships? They look like scrap yards that learned to fly." I did not answer him, because at that moment the lead ship, Enough, opened a communication channel with my palace. The face that appeared on my screen was not what I expected either. I had pictured a human warrior, tall, armored, fierce, perhaps covered in weapons. Instead, I saw a small female with short dark hair going gray at the edges. She wore a plain uniform that did not fit her very well. She was holding a cup of something dark and steaming, and she took a sip from it before she spoke. Her eyes were tired, the kind of tired that does not come from one bad night but from many years of bad nights. Behind her, I could see a bridge full of other humans, all of them moving with calm purpose. "Matriarch Lysana," she said. Her voice was rough and low. "I am Fleet Admiral Helen Burke of the Combined Human Defense Forces. I am in command of this response. I have read your casualty reports on the way here. I have some questions, but they can wait. First, tell me how long until the main enemy fleet arrives." 12 days, I whispered. "Perhaps 13. She nodded slowly. She took another sip from her cup. Then she said something that I would remember for the rest of my life. "That is enough time," she said. "We will take the job." I did not know what to say. I did not know if I should thank her, or warn her, or ask what she meant by the job. I was a ruler of a dying world, and I was suddenly being spoken to like a customer at a shop. "Admiral," I managed, "we cannot pay you. We have almost nothing left." She waved one hand as if brushing away a fly. "Matriarch," she said, "this is not that kind of contract. The contract we are honoring is an older one. We signed it with ourselves a long time ago. You do not owe us anything. Now please, if you would, send your senior military officer over to my ship. We have planning to do." And then she cut the channel. Taravan and I stared at each other. Neither of us spoke for a long moment. "Matriarch," he finally said, "what just happened?" I said slowly, "we were just rescued by a woman with a cup of hot drink." I sent Ven over to their flagship as my liaison. She did not want to go. She had heard the same stories I had heard about humans, but she was brave and she went. She took a small team of our officers with her. They came back 6 hours later with faces I could not read. Ven stood in front of me in the war room, and her light was doing something strange. It was not bright, but it was not dim either. It was flickering, the way it does when a Veshari is feeling too many things at once. "Matriarch," she said, "I must report what I have seen." "Tell me." She took a deep breath. "They are not what we thought, Matriarch. They are not what the Valari files said. They are something else." "Explain." Ven sat down without being invited to, which was a breach of court manners so severe that under normal times it would have been noticed. These were not normal times. "Their ships are ugly on the outside," she said. "But inside, Matriarch, inside they are something else. Every system is redundant. Every tool has 3 backups. Every officer has been trained to do 3 other jobs in case someone dies. They do not trust that things will go well. They plan for things to go very badly, and then they plan for worse, and then they plan for worse again." "That sounds sensible." It is not only sensible, matriarch. It is obsessive. They have thought of failures we have not imagined. They have weapons for enemies they have never met. They have medical supplies for injuries they have never seen. Their ship, Enough, alone has enough emergency rations to feed a small city for a year. They are prepared for a war that has not happened yet, against an enemy that does not exist. I frowned. Why? Ven looked at me. Her eyes were wide. Matriarch, she said, I asked Admiral Burke that same question. Do you know what she told me? What? She said, because once upon a time, the only enemy that could threaten a human was another human, and we became very good at imagining what the other human might try. I did not fully understand what that meant. Not yet. I would later. Ven continued. There is more, matriarch. I watched them plan the defense of our inner worlds. Their tactics do not make sense. They are not defensive. They are setting traps. They are leaving gaps on purpose. They are using our own ships as bait in some of the patterns, and they explained this openly to me, and our captains agreed to it without complaint because the human plan was so clearly better than anything we had come up with. Bait. Yes, they do not want to hold the line, matriarch. They want the enemy to push through certain corridors. They have chosen where the enemy will die, and they are arranging the battlefield so the enemy walks into those places without knowing it. I sat back in my chair. For the first time in many weeks, I felt a very small spark of something other than grief. Ven, I said, do they think they can win? Ven was silent for a long time. When she finally answered, her voice was quiet. Matriarch, they do not talk about winning. I asked them about odds. I asked them about probability. Admiral Burke laughed at me. She said, we do not do odds here. We do the job until the job is done or we are done. The enemy does not get a vote. I stared at her. That is not a military statement, I said. That is not how fleets talk. I know, matriarch. That is how a trapped animal talks. That is how someone talks when they have nothing left to lose. Ven nodded slowly. Yes, matriarch, I think that is exactly how they talk, except they have everything to lose. Their homes, their children, their world. They came here anyway, and they talk as if losing is simply not a word in their language. I did not sleep that night. I walked the halls of my palace alone. I thought about what Ven had told me. I thought about Admiral Burke's tired eyes. I thought about the ship called Enough and the ship called Bad Decision. I thought about an entire species that had spent thousands of years perfecting the art of fighting, not against monsters from space, but against itself. And now that they had finally stopped fighting each other, they had all that skill, all that craft, all that terrible practice, with no place to put it. Until now. 3 days later, a smaller force of Cathari raiders broke away from the main fleet and tried to hit one of our inner colonies. The humans had predicted this. The humans had been ready. I watched the battle from the bridge of my own flagship, a safe distance away, and I saw for the first time what humans actually did in a fight. I did not have words for it. I still do not have enough words for it. The Cathari came in fast, the way they always do, in a swarm of smaller ships that covered their bigger ones. The human fleet did not form lines. The human fleet broke apart, seemingly at random, into small groups of 3 and 4 ships each. Each group moved differently. None of them moved predictably. The Cathari, who have a shared mind, tried to track every group at once. Their hive brain began to overload. I could see it on the sensor readings. The enemy formation began to come apart. And then the humans struck. Not all at once, not in a great charge, in pieces, a strike here, a feint there, a sudden drop behind enemy lines, an attack on an area that seemed unimportant until it turned out to be the key to everything. The battle lasted 4 hours. At the end of it, not one Cathari ship was left moving. Admiral Burke's face appeared on my screen again. She took a sip from her cup. Matriarch, she said, that was the advance group. Main fleet is still coming. 9 days, we will be ready, please go rest. You look very tired." Then she cut the channel again. I looked at Taravan. Taravan looked at me. Neither of us knew whether to laugh or cry. So we did a little of both. The 9 days between the first battle and the arrival of the main enemy fleet were the strangest 9 days of my life. I spent much of that time on board the human flagship, Enough, at Admiral Burke's invitation. She said I needed to understand what was about to happen so that I could explain it later to the rest of the galaxy. She said there would be questions. She said there would be consequences. She said I needed to see with my own eyes, so that no one could lie to me about what my rescuers had done. I agreed to come aboard. My council begged me not to. A ruler does not go into the middle of a war, they said. A ruler stays safe. I told them that a ruler whose people are dying does not stay safe. A ruler stands where her people can see her standing. I went. The human ship was stranger on the inside than I had expected. The corridors were narrow and crowded. Humans moved past me carrying tools, meals, sleeping rolls, bundles of wires. They did not bow to me. They nodded. Sometimes they smiled. One young officer, a red-haired male named Peter, gave me a small wave as he went by with a coffee cup in each hand. I learned many things on that ship. I learned that humans eat constantly. There was always food somewhere on the ship, and someone was always eating. They ate while they worked. They ate during meetings. They brought food to other people without being asked. Food was a kind of language for them, and I began to understand that sharing food was how they said things they could not say with words. I learned that humans talked to their machines. They scolded broken equipment. They thanked working equipment. I once saw a senior engineer, a woman named Clara, pat the side of a reactor and whisper, "Good girl, hold together for me." I did not know if she meant it or if it was a joke. I am still not sure. I learned that humans joke during dangerous moments. Before the first small skirmish during my visit, I sat on the bridge and watched them prepare for contact with an enemy scout squadron. They were making jokes the whole time. Jokes about each other. Jokes about the enemy. Jokes about their own likely deaths. One pilot was laughing so hard at something his wingman had said that he could barely buckle his flight harness. I asked Admiral Burke about this. I said, "Your people joke about dying. Why?" She looked at me over the rim of her cup. She said, "Because if we let the fear in, it eats us. The jokes keep it out. The jokes are how we stay human in the dark." I did not have an answer for that. The skirmish came. The skirmish ended. The humans won it without losing a single ship. The pilot who had been laughing came back and got out of his fighter and vomited on the flight deck, and no one laughed at him for it. 2 other pilots helped him up and walked him to the medical bay. The jokes, I understood then, were not for strength. The jokes were for survival. The real feelings came later in private when no one was watching. I began to understand humans differently after that. They were not monsters. They were not the cold killers the Valari files had described. They were something both stranger and simpler. They were a species that had lived with fear for so long that they had learned to dance with it, to laugh with it, to invite it to dinner and use the wrong fork in front of it. Fear did not rule them. They ruled fear, and that made them extremely dangerous to anything that tried to make them afraid. On the 6th day of my visit, the main Cathari fleet entered long-range sensor range. 40,000 ships. I had read that number in reports before, but reading a number is not the same as seeing it. When the main screen on the bridge of Enough zoomed out to show me the enemy formation, I actually took a step back. The swarm filled the screen. It filled the space beyond the screen. It was not a fleet. It was an ocean. It was a dark tide rolling toward my home. Admiral Burke was standing beside me. She looked at the screen. She took a sip of her cup. She said one word. "Right." That was all. She turned around and began giving orders. Her voice did not rise. Her pace did not quicken. It was as if she had been expecting this moment for her whole life and was simply pleased it had finally arrived. The human fleet moved. It moved in patterns I could not read. Ships broke off in pairs and in threes. Some ships moved forward. Some moved backward. Some moved sideways and then stopped and did nothing. Sensor beams swept the enemy in ways that looked almost lazy, like a hunter taking her time to choose which target to aim at first. The Cathari came on. They did not change their approach. They never did. Their hive mind was a hammer and everything in its path was a nail. They had eaten 100 civilizations this way. It had always worked. It did not work this time. I will try to describe the battle, though I know I will fail. I am not a warrior. I am a politician. I do not have the language for what I saw. The humans fought like no one I had ever seen fight. They fought like a species that had spent thousands of years fighting other members of its own species, which meant every trick they knew had been designed to beat an enemy that was just as clever and just as desperate and just as prepared as they were. The Cathari were not that. The Cathari were clever in one way only, the way a storm is clever, and you could predict a storm if you studied it long enough. The humans had studied. They fainted. They drew the enemy into spaces that looked empty but were actually full of minds that only activated on a specific sensor frequency. They sent small ships deep into enemy territory as if those ships were lost, and when the enemy moved to eat them, the lost ships would turn out to be something else entirely. They used their own older vessels as bait, and the crews of those vessels cheered when they were chosen for the job, because it meant they mattered. It meant they were part of the plan. One moment I will never forget. A human destroyer, old, patched, worn, called the Blue Monday, flew straight at a Cathari dreadnought with all its engines burning hot. It was clearly going to ram the thing. The Cathari moved to stop it. They focused half their point defense on that one ship. And then, with barely a kilometer left between them, the Blue Monday did something no enemy had ever seen before. It split apart. Not destroyed. Split. It turned out the ship was not one ship but 3 small ships flying in formation so tight that the enemy sensors had read it as a single hull. The 3 small ships scattered in 3 directions. The Cathari dreadnought, its defenses all aimed at one place, was hit from 3 sides at once. It came apart. That, Admiral Burke said quietly next to me, is a trick we invented about 200 years ago to fight each other. The first time it was used, it ended a war. We have been refining it ever since. Against a hive mind that does not update its tactics, it works very well. I looked at her. She was watching the battle the way an artist watches a painting come together, not with anger, not with hate, with interest, with craft. The battle went on for 6 hours. When it ended, 40,000 Cathari ships had been reduced to floating metal and dust. The human fleet had lost 47 ships, 47 out of a starting force of over 2,000. The admiral called each ship by name when the final count came in. She did not miss one. She spoke each name aloud, and when she was done, every human on the bridge was silent for 1 full minute. Then they went back to work. "We have to chase the stragglers," Admiral Burke told me. "The swarm is broken but not dead. The Cathari will regroup if we let them. We will not let them." "What will you do?" I asked. She looked at me for a long moment. Her eyes were the oldest I had ever seen on any living creature, older than any Thalari elder, older than the oldest Droth clan lord, tired in a way that went beyond one body or one lifetime. "Matriarch," she said, "there is a part of the plan you are not going to like. I want to tell you about it now. If you say no, we will not do it, but I think you should say yes." "Tell me." She told me. She explained that the Cathari were a hive mind, and that a hive mind had one weakness: its signal. If the signal could be disrupted in a certain specific way, the hive would not just break. It would turn on itself. The parts of it would stop recognizing each other as allies. They would fight. They would tear themselves apart from the inside, and they would do it without needing any more attacks from outside. She explained that the humans had developed the method of doing this during their long war against the Cathari's smaller cousins in a sector on the far side of human space, years ago, before the humans had ever met my people. She explained that the method was classified. She explained that using it here would reveal a capability to the galaxy that humans had tried to keep hidden. "Why is it hidden?" I asked. "Because, matriarch," she said, "there are other hive minds out there. Not enemies yet, maybe never enemies, but if they knew we had this weapon they might become enemies out of fear, so we do not use it lightly. We have only used it twice before, once to end that earlier war, once to prevent a disaster in our own space. If we use it here, 3 species that are currently our neighbors will know what we can do. Our lives will get harder." I looked at her. "And you are asking me if you should use it?" "I am asking you," she said. "It is your war, your people, your call." I thought about my dying world. I thought about my 2 billion dead. I thought about the colonies that were still holding on, with children in shelters waiting to see if morning would come. I thought about what the Valari had said, that the Cathari could not be reasoned with, therefore they could not be stopped. I thought about the word enough. I looked at Admiral Burke. "Use it," I said. She nodded once. She turned to her officers and gave a short order I did not understand. 3 ships detached from the main fleet and began moving in a specific formation I had never seen before. They began to transmit something. I could see the transmissions on the sensor board. They were not weapons exactly. They were signals. They were in the exact frequency the Cathari used to talk to themselves, but twisted, changed, corrupted in ways that looked small and were not small. I watched the remaining Cathari fleet, scattered now across the outer system, begin to behave strangely. Ships stopped moving. Then ships began to move against each other. Within 1 hour, the Cathari were doing to themselves what they had been trying to do to us. Within 6 hours, the hive mind was in full collapse. Within 12 hours, there was no more Cathari fleet. There were only individual ships, confused and angry and alone, hunting each other through empty space. It was, I realized, the end of a war that had been going for my entire life. Admiral Burke was sitting in her command chair. Her cup was empty. She looked at the tactical display one more time, and then she closed her eyes for just a moment. When she opened them, she looked at me. "Matriarch," she said, "your people are safe. I am very sorry we did not come sooner." I could not speak. I only reached out and took her hand. Her hand was warm. My own hand, I noticed, had started to glow again. Word of what happened above my homeworld traveled through the galaxy faster than any ship. By the time I returned to my planet, the news had already reached every member species of the Galactic Accord. The Valari had called an emergency session. The Orcs were already updating their probability models. The Droth clan lords were sending quiet messages to Human Command asking about training programs for their young warriors. And in 1,000 smaller species across the Accord, small private conversations were happening in small private rooms. The galaxy had just learned something new about humans, and the galaxy was not sure how to feel about it. I landed on my capital world 6 days after the main battle. My people met me at the spaceport in numbers I had not seen since my coronation many years ago. They had come out of their shelters. They had come down from the mountains and up from the seas. They had come to see their matriarch and to see the humans who had saved them. I stepped off my shuttle and the light from my body was strong again, stronger than it had been in decades. I realized as I walked through the crowd that many of my people were glowing brightly for the first time in months. Hope had come back to us. You could see it in the air. Behind me walked Admiral Burke and a small group of her officers. She had come down to see my world. She said she had never been on a Veshari planet before, and it seemed rude not to visit now that we were not going to die. My people did not know how to react to the humans. Many of them had never seen a human in person. Some backed away as the group walked past. Some reached out to touch their uniforms and then pulled back, shy. One small child, a Veshari girl of perhaps 4 cycles old, walked straight up to Admiral Burke and stared up at her. The Admiral stopped walking. She looked down at the child. She crouched until her face was level with the little glowing face in front of her. She set her cup down on the ground next to her. She did not speak. She just looked at the child, and the child looked back. After a long moment, the child reached out one tiny hand. Admiral Burke reached out one of hers. Their fingers touched. The child's light brightened so much that people nearby had to shield their eyes. The Admiral smiled. It was the first real smile I had seen on her face since we had met. She stood up, she picked up her cup, she looked at me. "Matriarch," she said quietly, "that is why we came. That right there. That is the whole reason, in case anyone asks you later." I nodded. I could not speak. The next 3 days were spent on ceremony. My council insisted, and I let them. There were speeches. There were songs. There were offerings of food and flowers that the humans accepted politely, though I noticed several of them carefully hiding certain Veshari delicacies in their pockets when they thought no one was watching. I did not blame them. The fermented light fruit is an acquired taste. On the 4th day, a message came through from the Accord Council. I was summoned to appear before them. The Valari Archon had called a formal hearing on the matter of the human intervention. He was demanding a full account, and he was clearly intending to use the hearing as the opening move in a larger political attack against humanity. I read the message in my study. Admiral Burke was visiting that morning. She was sitting in a chair across from me, drinking from her cup as usual. She watched me read. "Trouble?" she asked. "The Accord is calling a hearing," I said. "The Valari want to punish humanity for what you did here. They will say you broke protocols. They will say you used forbidden weapons. They will try to have humanity placed under formal restriction, perhaps even quarantine again." She took a sip, figured that was coming. "You do not seem worried." "Matriarch, I have been worried about the Valari since the moment we joined the Accord. They have never liked us. They never will. There is no version of events where they approve of humanity. So I do not spend energy worrying about what they think. I spend energy worrying about what is actually going to happen." "What is actually going to happen?" She set her cup down. "That depends," she said, "on what you say at the hearing." I looked at her. "Matriarch," she said, "you are the one who called us. You are the one who granted us permission to fight in your space. If you stand before the Accord and tell them you regret the call, tell them we overstepped, tell them you want us gone, then we will be in serious trouble. The Valari will have their case. Humanity will be pushed back. Perhaps not quarantined again, but limited, watched more closely, cut out of deep space operations." I would never say any of those things. "I know you would not, but the Valari will try to frame it that way even if you do not say it. They will ask you leading questions. They will take your words out of context. They will suggest that you were coerced. You need to be ready for that." "What do you suggest?" She smiled a small, thin smile. "Matriarch," she said, "I suggest you tell the truth, the whole truth, loudly, in the clearest voice you have, and I suggest you let no one else speak over you while you do it." I traveled to the Accord station a week later. Admiral Burke came with me, along with a small delegation of my own advisors. The station was enormous, a ring around a neutral star, built by the Valari thousands of years ago to be the gathering place of civilized species. I had been here many times, but this time felt different. This time I was not a guest. This time I was a witness in a trial that was not called a trial. The Great Hall was full. Every major species had sent representatives. The Valari Archon sat in the center seat, an ancient being made of layered silk and slow thought. The Oryx delegation was a cluster of silver spheres that hummed softly when they spoke. The Droth had sent their oldest clan lord, a female with battle scars visible through her ceremonial armor. I saw a dozen smaller species I had met before, and a few I had only seen in reports. The humans were not seated in the main circle. The Valari Archon had arranged that. They were placed at a secondary table, off to the side, like observers rather than members. Admiral Burke did not seem to mind. She sat in her chair and drank from her cup and waited. The hearing began. The Archon spoke first. His voice was like paper moving in wind. He spoke for nearly an hour. He listed the violations. He described the human actions in the worst possible terms. He said the humans had used forbidden weapons. He said they had exceeded their mandate. He said they had revealed dangerous capabilities that had destabilized the balance of the galaxy. He said that humanity, in its short time as a member of the Accord, had already proven that it could not be trusted with the freedom it had been given. He finished by saying that he moved to place humanity under formal Accord restriction, with a secondary motion for a full review of their membership. Several species murmured agreement, some were silent. The Archon turned his long gray face toward me. "Matriarch Lysana of the Veshari Concordance," he said, "you are the one who invited this species into your space. You are the one whose call brought them. We would like to hear your account of their behavior so that the Accord can judge them fairly." He said the word fairly in a way that was not fair at all. I stood up. I walked to the center of the hall. I stood in the light. My body glowed strongly, stronger than I had ever glowed before, because I was angry and I was sad and I was proud, and all of those things together made me burn. I looked around the hall. I looked at each delegation in turn. I took my time. Then I spoke. "Archon," I said, "before I answer your questions, I have some of my own. May I ask them?" He was surprised. No one asks the Archon questions at a hearing. He nodded slowly, because to refuse would have been improper. "Thank you," I said. "Archon, when my people sent you a call for help 12 weeks ago, did you receive it?" A long silence. "Yes." "How long did you take to reply?" Silence. "Archon, how long?" 17 days. "And what was your reply?" "We declined to intervene. The situation was deemed unwinnable." "Thank you. Honored Oryx delegation, when my people sent you a call for help, did you receive it?" The spheres hummed, "Yes." "How long did you take to reply?" 6 days. "And your reply?" "Our models indicated a survival probability of 0.003%. Resources could not be justified." "Thank you, Clan Lord Drace of the Droth. When my people sent you a call for help, did you receive it?" The Droth female lowered her head. "Yes, Matriarch." "Did you reply?" "We sent 3 warships. They were destroyed within the first hour of engagement. We mourned them. We did not send more." "Thank you, Clan Lord. I do not blame you. You tried, that matters." I turned back to the Archon. "Archon," I said, and my voice was loud enough now that it filled the hall. "When the humans received my call for help, do you know how long they took to reply?" He said nothing. 4 minutes. The hall went very still. 4 minutes, Archon, not 17 days, not 6 days, not after long calculations, 4 minutes. And do you know what their reply said? It said 3 sentences. "Message received, hold on, we are coming." That was all. No questions, no demands, no long discussions of policy, just a promise. I looked around the hall. "Archon, you have said that humans used forbidden weapons. They used one capability that they had kept quiet, yes. They used it with my permission, which I gave freely, knowing what it would cost them to reveal. You have said they broke protocol. I will say now to this council that there is no protocol in my civilization that prevents a dying people from accepting help from a hand that is offered. If the Accord has such a protocol, then the Accord has a sick heart, and it should be examined." The Valari Archon tried to interrupt me. I did not let him. "You have said, Archon, that humanity has destabilized the balance of the galaxy. I will tell you the truth. The balance of the galaxy was that civilized people watched uncivilized people die, calculated odds, and turned away. That was the balance. The humans destabilized nothing. They simply did not participate in it. They did the one thing none of you could bring yourselves to do. They came. They did the work. They saved a world, and they did not ask to be paid, and they did not demand territory, and they did not ask for ongoing influence. And when the job was done, most of them went home. That is not dangerous, Archon. That is what decent people do. If the Accord finds this threatening, then perhaps the Accord should look in a mirror. The hall was completely silent. I took a breath. I let my light shine at its full strength. Every eye in the room was on me. I am the matriarch of the Veshari Concordance, I said. I speak for 2 billion of my dead, and for the 8 billion who are still alive to speak with me. Under the ancient right of invited sanctuary, which has been in Accord law for over 10,000 years, and has never once been invoked, I formally grant the human species full protector status within Veshari space. They may enter our systems at will. They may base their fleets on our worlds if they wish. They are, by Veshari law, kin to us now. Anyone who attacks them attacks us. Anyone who moves against them moves against us. Gasps, actual gasps. The right of invited sanctuary had been in law for so long that most species had forgotten it existed. It could not be overturned, not by a council vote, not by the Archon himself. It was a bilateral sovereign matter, and I had just invoked it in open chamber. The Archon's silk robes trembled. Matriarch, he began, this is most irregular. The council has not considered. There are procedures, there are forms. Archon, I said, I am not asking the council's permission. I am informing the council of a fact. The matter is done. It was done the moment I spoke the words. Veshari law requires no further process. I turned and walked back to my seat. As I sat down, I heard from the human table the quiet sound of Admiral Burke setting down her cup and beginning to clap, slowly at first, just her. Then one of her officers joined, then another. Then from around the hall, one by one, other species joined in. The Droth clan lord stood up and clapped with her scarred hands raised high. The Thalari Archon sat very still, and he did not speak for a long time. The hearing ended without a ruling. The motion against humanity was quietly dropped 3 days later when it became clear that it would fail by a significant margin. The Thalari had overplayed their hand. They had tried to shame a grieving matriarch, and the grieving matriarch had turned out to have teeth. I returned home on the human flagship, Enough. Admiral Burke sat with me on the bridge during the transit. We watched the stars move. Matriarch, she said quietly, that was quite a speech. I meant every word of it. I know you did. That is why it worked. She took a sip. You may have just changed the shape of galactic politics for the next 1,000 years. I hope so. She smiled, me too. We drank our drinks, we watched the stars. I thought about the long road ahead. I thought about the work of rebuilding. I thought about the strange new friendship between my species and hers, this species that had come out of nowhere to save my world, this species of tired eyes and ugly ships and bad jokes and very good engineers. I thought about the word the Admiral had used on that first day. Enough. It had seemed like a strange name for a warship then. Now I thought I understood it a little better. Enough suffering, enough watching, enough turning away, enough. Yes, that felt right. 5 years have passed since the day the humans came. I sit now in the garden outside my palace, and I write these final words on a simple pad that a human engineer gave me as a gift. It is a rugged machine, built to last, built to survive being dropped or soaked or forgotten in a drawer for a decade. It is very human, this machine. It does not pretend to be beautiful. It simply works reliably every time for years on end. I have come to love it. My light is bright today. The garden is full of bloom. Children are playing in the long grass, Veshari children and human children together, because there are quite a few humans living here now, in the small district of my capital that has slowly grown up over these 5 years. You can hear them calling to each other in 2 languages that have mixed together in strange ways. There is a human boy, maybe 9 years old, teaching a Veshari girl how to kick a leather ball. There is a Veshari elder, one of my old tutors, patiently explaining the rules of our memory game to a human grandmother who is laughing and losing badly. The sun is warm. The air smells of cooking food. 5 years ago this garden was ash. I want to sit down, before I am too old to do it properly. The story of what happened after the battle and the hearing, because the story did not end there. Stories rarely end where people expect them to. Stories keep going, quietly, long after the loud part is over. The first thing that happened after the hearing was that the humans started to leave. Admiral Burke brought her fleet home to Earth. She said she had been away long enough. She said there were debts to pay back home, apologies to make, children she had barely seen, a husband she had not held in over a year. She came to my palace on her last day in our system, and we shared one final drink on the balcony where I had once stood alone and prayed for help from any voice that would answer. "Matriarch," she said, "I am retiring." "You are not old enough to retire." She laughed. "Matriarch, I have been doing this job for 34 years. There is a version of me that has been tired for a long time. I would like to go home and be that version now. Let someone else have the cup." "Who?" "Oh, there are plenty of young admirals eager for it. Do not worry about us. Worry about your own people. They will need you more than ever now." "What will you do at home?" She thought about it. "I think I will grow tomatoes." I laughed. I had not expected that answer. Tomatoes. "You have never had a tomato, Matriarch. That is a gap I intend to correct the next time you visit Earth, which you are invited to do, by the way, whenever you like. Please bring Taravan. He would like my husband very much. They have the same sense of humor." We drank in silence for a while. The sun was setting on my capital. My city was mostly rebuilt. The scars of the war were still there if you knew where to look, but the children did not know where to look, and that was the whole point. "Admiral," I said, "may I ask you a question I have wanted to ask for a long time?" "Of course." "On that first day, when I sent out the call for help, you replied in 4 minutes. Do you know why I mentioned this?" "Yes, you have mentioned it in every speech you have made for 5 years. I mention it because it is important, but I have always wondered. 4 minutes is not enough time to analyze a situation. It is not enough time to hold a command meeting. It is not enough time to calculate odds or plan a response. How did you reply in 4 minutes?" She was quiet for a long moment. She took a slow sip. She looked at the sunset. "Matriarch," she said, "I have told very few people this. I will tell you because I think you earned the answer a long time ago. When your call came in, there was a room on Earth. It was not a war room. It was not a command center. It was a small room with a small desk and one officer on duty. That officer's job was to watch for certain kinds of calls. The officer had a book of rules. The book of rules had been written about 200 years ago, after the last big war on our world. The book has one main instruction on the first page. Do you want to know what it says?" "Please." "It says, if a voice you do not know calls for help from the dark and the voice is crying and the situation is real, you do not call a meeting. You do not run the numbers. You say yes. You figure out the rest later. You say yes first. That is the rule. It is the only rule on that first page. Every officer who has ever sat in that room has been tested on that rule. Every officer has promised to follow it." I was quiet. "The officer on duty that day," the admiral said, "was a young man named Daniel. He heard your call. He read your casualty numbers. He looked at the coordinates. He cried, actually. He told me later. And then he pressed the button that sent back our reply. 4 minutes. He did not call anyone first. The fleet response started the moment he pressed the button, because the book of rules had a chapter on what to do next, and that chapter is very specific. By the time senior command got involved, ships were already moving. A young officer made that decision alone." "Yes." "Did he get in trouble?" Admiral Burke laughed. "Matriarch, he got promoted. Twice. He is a commander now. He still keeps the letter you sent afterward framed on his wall. He reads it when his own days are hard." I blinked. The letter I sent. You sent a thank you letter to every human who participated in the response. Every single one. It took my office months to deliver them all. You probably do not remember each one. But the ones to the junior officers meant a great deal. Daniels was one of them. He says he reads it when he wonders if the job is worth it. I did not know what to say. I had sent those letters because it had seemed like the right thing to do. I had not known they would matter so much. Admiral, I said, your species is very strange. I know, matriarch. I am glad you are strange. Me too. She left the next day. I watched her ship lift off my world. It was a different ship this time, not enough, which was still in service somewhere far away. Her personal transport was a smaller thing, still ugly, still welded, still with the human look of something built by hand. It lifted into the sky and was gone, and I stood on my balcony and watched it go, and my light was bright but my heart was heavy. You can be grateful for someone and still be sad when they leave. That is something humans taught me. The years since have been full of small things. Rebuilding, trade agreements, treaties. The slow work of bringing 10 billion people back from the edge of extinction. My people are busy. My people are happy. My people are alive. But the biggest change is not in my people. The biggest change is in the galaxy itself. The Valari are quieter now. They still dislike humans. They still argue against them in council sessions. But they have lost the ability to lead the galaxy the way they used to. Too many species saw what happened in my system. Too many species saw the humans come, do the work, and leave without demanding payment. Too many species remembered that the Valari had refused. The Valari are still old. They are still wise in many ways, but they are no longer the voice that other species listen to first. That voice is changing. The Orcs have updated their probability models. Their new calculations include a variable they call in their precise machine speech the human factor. It is a strange variable. It does not behave like other variables. It is, as they put it, non-convergent. They are studying it. They are fascinated by it. I have heard they have requested permission to send observers to live on Earth long-term. I hope the humans say yes. I think the Orcs would benefit from spending time in a place where things do not always make sense. The Droth are the most changed. They have always been warriors, but their way of war was old, formal, full of honor duels and single combat. The humans have taught them a different way. Not better necessarily, just different. Droth war colleges now have human instructors. Droth officers now come back from their training speaking quietly about things like combined operations and asymmetric response and trauma recovery for veterans. The old clan lords grumble about this. The young warriors nod and keep learning. Something is changing in the Droth soul, and I do not know yet what it will become. And the smaller species, the ones who never had a voice in the accord before, have begun to speak up. Because they have seen that the Valari can be faced down. They have seen that the old order is not absolute. The matriarch of the Veshari stood in the center of the hall and told the Archon he was wrong, and the sky did not fall. Others have taken courage from that. Others have begun to say their own pieces in their own words about their own concerns. The accord chamber is louder now than it used to be. Some of the old species find this uncomfortable. I find it wonderful. Teravan sits beside me often in his old age, and he tells me that the galaxy is better for what happened in our system. I am not sure that is fully true. I think the galaxy is different, and different is not always better, and it is too early to tell. But I think the galaxy has more possibility now. More room. More voices. That alone is worth something. I think often about the humans. I think about their tired eyes. I think about their bad jokes. I think about the way they eat constantly and talk to their machines and laugh in the dark to keep the fear out. I think about the quiet rule in the small room on Earth, the rule that says say yes first and figure out the rest later. I think about how that rule was not always there. I know a little of human history now. I have read their records. There was a time, not so long ago, when humans did not say yes to each other's cries for help. There was a time when humans were the thing in the dark that the cries were about. They changed. They decided to be different. They wrote a rule in a book and they promised to keep it. They spent 200 years keeping it. They got good at keeping it. And when a small glowing people they had never met sent out a cry from the other side of the galaxy, they did not need to think about what to do. The answer was already written. The answer was in the book on the first page. The answer was yes. I think that is the most human thing about them, actually. Not the ugly ships or the jokes or the constant eating. The decision, made once, a long time ago, to become the thing that comes when called. The decision to be the voice that says, "Hold on, we are coming, you will not be alone." A species can decide who it wants to be. That is a thing I did not fully believe before the humans came. I had thought that species were what they were, shaped by their history, unable to change. The Valari had always been cold and political. The Orcs had always been rational. The Droth had always been warriors. I had thought that was how the galaxy worked. The humans taught me otherwise. The humans taught me that a species can look at itself not like what it sees and change, slowly, imperfectly, with many mistakes, but really change, really become something different than what it was. That is an enormous thing to learn. It is the most hopeful thing I have ever learned. It means that other species can do it too. It means that we are not trapped. It means that the galaxy can become kinder if we decide, one species at a time, to become kinder ourselves. I am going to spend the rest of my reign trying to teach this to my people and to anyone else who will listen. I do not know how much time I have left. Veshari live long but not forever, and I am already old. I would like to be remembered when I am gone as the matriarch who made the call. But more than that, I would like to be remembered as the matriarch who passed on what the humans taught her. Which is that help can come from the most unexpected places, and that the scariest thing in the galaxy can turn out to be exactly what the galaxy needed, and that a rough voice on a narrow beam from a small blue planet can change the course of history if the voice is willing to say yes. I will finish this record now. The sun is getting low. The children in the garden are being called to dinner. I can smell cooking from the human district. Someone there is making bread, I think. The smell of human bread is one of my favorite smells in the world. I did not know what bread was 5 years ago. There is a message coming in on my pad. It is from Admiral Burke. Former Admiral, I should say. She writes to me often. The message is short. It says she has grown her first successful tomato and she wants to know when I am coming to visit Earth so she can feed me one. She says I will not believe how they taste. I will write back later tonight. I will tell her I am coming soon. I have wanted to see her home for a long time. I want to see the small room with the desk, where a young officer once pressed a button and saved my civilization without knowing yet that he had done it. I want to see the book of rules, open to the first page, with the one main instruction written in plain human letters. I want to stand in that room and be quiet for a while. And I want to taste a tomato. I look up from my pad. The children are still playing. Their voices float through the warm air. My light shines softly on the garden stones. Taravan is napping in his chair next to mine. A small bird is singing in the tree. My people are alive. My world is whole. The galaxy is different now, and different is scary, but different is also full of possibility. And somewhere, on a small blue planet very far from here, a retired fleet admiral is tending her tomato plants and waiting for a glowing friend to come visit. I think at last that everything is going to be all right. I set down my pad, I close my eyes, I let the warm sun fall on my face. And I say, to no one in particular, and to everyone, and to the memory of a voice from the dark that answered in 4 minutes when no one else would. Thank you. That is all. That has always been enough.